that his team interviews went poorly. Honestly, guys notice it more when you're out winning games, right? If Cleveland starts off in a bad start, they're not doing well, and all of a sudden Shedeur or Dillon Gabriel are doing well in 7-on-7, they're throwing dimes. In practice drills, the number one defense can't stop them. People take notice of that, and the more that the players see it, then the comments start happening over the lunch table. They start happening throughout the building, and that's when the pressure really will.
What happens when one of the NFL's most respected voices, a Super Bowl champ, a future Hall of Famer, casually tears your entire franchise to shreds right before the season even starts? That's exactly what just happened in Cleveland. While fans were busy arguing over training camp reps and preseason depth charts, Jason Kelce, yes, that Jason Kelce, jumped on a mic and dropped a truth bomb so blunt, it might have sent billionaire team owner Jimmy Haslam into a full-blown midlife crisis. No spin, no sugarcoating, just raw, unscripted reality. His message was simple: you're not ready. Your house is built on broken plays, bad contracts, and blind hope, and everyone else can see it. 1 minute you've got analysts calling the Browns a sleeper contender. The next, Kelce's reminding the world that they're one quarterback injury away from total collapse. And the worst part? He's not wrong.
He's seasoned, he's experienced, he still has a big-time arm, even at his age, and they open with the Cincinnati Bengals. They wanted that experienced guy. He was always going to be the guy. They were not going to start Dillon Gabriel or Shadeur Sanders in week 1. Kenny Pickett had a hamstring injury. It makes it easy to go with Joe Flacco. And the question isn't and wasn't going to be who's the starter in Cleveland. The question is who's going to be the backup in Cleveland. Who's going to be the number 2 quarterback when they open the season against these Bengals.
Inside the building, panic quietly sets in. Coaching staff on edge. Players wondering who's actually running the show. And fans, they're not mad. They're nodding because deep down, they've seen this movie too many times before. But this isn't just another preseason distraction. What Kelce said has real consequences. It exposed just how fragile the Browns' foundation really is. And depending on how this story unfolds, it could cost people their jobs, reputations, and maybe even what's left of Cleveland's credibility. Because when someone like Jason Kelce speaks, the entire NFL listens. And this time, what he said might just change everything. Jason Kelce didn't rant. He didn't explode. He didn't even raise his voice. He just spoke, calmly, casually, like he was talking football with a few old friends. And that's what made it even harder.
Couple days, 3 days until roster cutdowns. How do you feel about that? Do you feel like you belong here on this team?
Obviously, I think overall as a player, I feel like I put in the work. I feel like everything I do, I try to do it to my best, and that's all I ask for. So I feel like everybody feels like, they should be on the team. And if you ask anybody on the team, would they feel like they belong, in their own eyes. So I feel like I do, but I'm my own player. I think about myself in a high regard.
Because instead of media hype or angry sports radio noise, this came from someone who knows. A guy who spent his career protecting elite quarterbacks, winning playoff games, and anchoring one of the most respected locker rooms in the league. So when Jason Kelce looked at the Cleveland Browns quarterback situation and basically said, this entire setup is a ticking time bomb, the NFL took notice. He pointed out what insiders have quietly whispered for months. That if Deshaun Watson goes down, if Joe Flacco falters, or if this all turns into a camp competition disaster between Dillon Gabriel and Shadeur Sanders, Cleveland's season isn't derailed, it's detonated. And then he really twisted the knife. Kelce said Shedeur was thrown into a nightmare, Dillon got the star treatment, and Joe Flacco, he was set up to save a collapsing roster. Again, no filters, no fake optimism, no corporate spin. Just the kind of brutal honesty that front offices hate and players deeply respect.
Quarterback okay, this is the situation. Kenny Pickett, they actually traded for him. Joe Flacco, no one's bringing Joe Flacco in the building thinking Joe Flacco is going to be the starter. If Joe Flacco is your starter,
You got a problem.
you have a huge problem. And if they were saying Shedeur was the starter as the 5th rounder, you got a real problem too, because he passed over all these guys in these reps in the offseason in shorts, in bikini shorts, Speedos and stuff. Like, no, that kind of stuff. So I'm not that surprised. When you put down a 3rd round pick on a quarterback, you do believe he has a certain skill set.
Within hours, clips were going viral, fans were having meltdowns, and inside the Browns facility, there was no laughter, just silence. Because when your carefully crafted QB plans are getting shredded by a guy sipping post-retirement protein shakes, you're not running a franchise. You're running out of time. Let's be honest, if there was a Hall of Fame for haunted quarterback decisions, the Browns would get their own wing. This team doesn't just have a QB problem. They've got a full-blown identity crisis that's lasted over 2 decades. From Johnny Manziel's implosion to Brandon Weeden getting sacked by an American flag before ever throwing a touchdown, Cleveland has turned the search for a franchise quarterback into an ongoing meme. Even when Baker Mayfield showed flashes of magic, they couldn't commit to him. They moved on, fast, just like they always do.
Given what we saw yesterday with Shadeur Sanders, somebody on the Cleveland Browns is 100% getting fired, probably by the end of this year. The person who's probably going to end up getting fired is Kevin Stefanski, because I know that he didn't want Shedeur Sanders on the team. It was Andrew Berry who made that pick. You can't really go against your GM. Bad things happen in this situation. But Shedeur Sanders is not without fault for what we saw yesterday. This is the play that we saw yesterday that has the internet just exploding, where Shedeur Sanders took like a 24-yard sack. Half of the internet is saying that this is all Kevin Stefanski's fault.
Now, it's Deshaun Watson, once billed as the savior. Instead, they paid $230 million guaranteed for a guy who's either injured or forgotten how to play like a pro. And behind him, a rotating cast of names that sounds more like a Madden draft simulation than a real depth chart. Joe Flacco, Dylan Gabriel, and Shedeur Sanders. Kelce didn't throw shade to be edgy. He exposed a truth Browns fans already knew in their bones. You can't keep gambling at quarterback and act surprised when the house wins. And it's not just about talent. It's about how they're handled. Why does one quarterback get full reps in practice, first-team protection, hand-picked play calls, and the other gets tossed to the wolves? The favoritism isn't just obvious. It's destructive. Cleveland's QB room looks less like a battle and more like a setup. A setup that's dividing the locker room, splitting the fan base, and sending warning flares to pretty much every other team in the league.
Have the faith of a mustard seed. Right, because this is the greatest resurrection since Jesus the Christ. Right, like at some point, Joe Flacco was thinking about getting into TV.
Yeah.
Right, Joe Flacco didn't have a job, and then now you not only come back and start for the Cleveland Browns late in the 2023 season, but they came back around to you, and you're now the day one starter for a franchise that just 2 years ago was in the playoffs.
If you don't figure out the most important position in football, the rest doesn't matter. And right now, the Browns are proving that curse still hasn't been lifted. It was supposed to be a game-changing move. When the Browns signed Deshaun Watson to a fully guaranteed $230 million deal, fans held their breath. Some called it bold. Others called it reckless. But everyone agreed this was it. The franchise had finally gone all in. Fast forward, and that bet's looking less like genius and more like a slow-motion disaster. Watson's played in what feels like half a season, spread over 2 years. When he's on the field, he's rusty, inconsistent, hesitant, far from the elite-level QB Cleveland thought they bought. And off the field, the shadow of past controversies still hangs heavy, whether the team admits it or not. Meanwhile, that contract is poison. Every dollar is locked in.
This is the unofficial depth chart that they released prior to the preseason game, where now Tyler Huntley would be, right behind Flacco. They need to take Flacco and just put him away, get him ready for the Cincinnati Bengals. Like, don't even worry.
Put him in the cryo chamber that Bobby Carpenter sleeps in every night.
Yeah.
The cap hit gets uglier by the year. Cleveland can't restructure it. They can't cut him. They can't even imagine trading him. He's not just a player anymore. He's a financial anchor, dragging the whole organization down no matter how much they try to spin it. And then came the final punch to the gut. Joe Flacco, a 39-year-old who walked in cold and started firing touchdown passes like it was 2012. In mere weeks, he did what Watson couldn't. Move the offense, win games, inject life into a stale system. The fact that that happened with a guy off his couch was humiliating. Jason Kelce noticed. Everyone noticed. Because when your backup outshines your $230 million franchise guy on national television, it's not a feel-good story. It's an indictment. And that's what makes this even worse. Watson's presence isn't just underwhelming, it's unavoidable. Until he either turns into his Houston version or disappears entirely. The Browns are stuck. And the bill? It just keeps coming due. In the NFL, there's a saying. When things go wrong, the head coach goes first. And if the Browns implode this season, Kevin Stefanski knows what's coming. On paper, he should be safe. Coach of the Year trophy? Check. Playoff win over the Steelers? Yup. A revitalized defense under his watch? Definitely. But in Cleveland, stability's a myth, and job security disappears faster than a Browns lead in the fourth quarter. The cracks are already showing. Reports claim that he didn't even want Shadeur Sanders on the team. That was a front office move by GM Andrew Berry, a power play. Stefanski reportedly preferred sticking with veterans. But Berry took the gamble, and now Stefanski's stuck juggling reps, media pressure, and a fan base foaming at the mouth for answers. That split matters. When a team struggles, ownership looks for a fall guy. And it's usually the one calling plays. Not the one signing contracts. Here's the kicker. Stefanski's in a lose-lose position. If he gives Shedeur too much playing time and it goes badly, people will say he sabotaged the kid. If he benches him entirely, he'll be accused of protecting his own job at the expense of development. When the rumors start flying, perception becomes reality. Kelce's comments didn't just call out the quarterback carousel. They reignited questions about whether this coaching staff can even evaluate talent at the position. And once that narrative spreads, it sticks. There's a storm brewing inside Berea. And if things don't click soon, Stefanski won't just be on the hot seat. He'll be first out the door. Shadeur Sanders walked into Cleveland with expectations strapped to his back like body armor. And no one bothered to tell him the firing squad was already aiming. Preseason fans were hyped. The highlight clips, the college swagger, the famous name, it felt like lightning in a bottle. But when he finally got reps, it wasn't just a bad game. It looked like sabotage. He was running for his life behind a second-string offensive line that couldn't block a pop-up ad. His weapons? Practice squad receivers. The play calling? Conservative, predictable, borderline insulting, and still, people rushed to call him garbage, including Jason Kelce, who, while brutally honest, pointed out what fans had already started questioning. Did Shedeur ever get a real shot? Or was this just another dysfunctional Browns experiment set up to fail from the jump? Because you can't cry bust if you never gave the guy a chance to do anything but run for his life. Even Shedeur's worst critics had to admit he didn't have the opportunity to be bad. That's how bad everything around him was. But there's another side to this. Some insiders believe he was never ready to begin with. That putting him in preseason wasn't setting him up. It was exposing him. Mentally, physically, developmentally, he wasn't there yet. And thrusting him in early may have done more harm than good. Now the locker room split. The fan base is arguing. and the whispers online are growing louder. Was this mismanagement? Or did Cleveland overhype another QB who just isn't NFL ready? Either way, Shedeur's storyline is no longer about talent. It's about survival. And in Cleveland, that's never guaranteed. Jason Kelce didn't rant, and he definitely wasn't chasing headlines. He just sat down, popped the cork on his retirement honesty, and spoke what most of the NFL world already sensed. The Cleveland Browns are one wrong step away from collapse. The power of his words wasn't in the volume, it was in the weight. This wasn't some click-hungry analyst or anonymous scout. This was a future Hall of Famer, a Super Bowl champion, and a leader who's seen what a stable, winning organization actually looks like. And that's why his comments hit like an earthquake. Because he wasn't being outrageous, he was being accurate. Kelce's breakdown wasn't personal, but it was precise. He called out the favoritism. He highlighted the dysfunction. He exposed the horrifying truth that the Browns aren't building anything real. They're just duct taping over disaster. Inside the league, executives and coaches definitely noticed. In Cleveland's own locker room, it validated what players were saying quietly behind closed doors. And the fan reaction? Explosive. Memes everywhere. Posts like Kelce for GM trending. Brown supporters weren't offended. They were agreeing with him. But the people who didn't laugh were upstairs, in suits, in offices, where perception is reality, and control of the narrative means everything. That's why Jimmy Haslam reportedly went into meltdown mode. Not because Kelce said something wild, but because he said something true. And he said it with a platform big enough that everyone heard it. Reality didn't come knocking. It came crashing through the front door in an Eagles hoodie. And the Browns? They were too busy managing chaos to stop it. It's one thing to be dysfunctional. It's another to be dysfunctional in the middle of a war zone. Welcome to the AFC North, where even the bad days come with broken bones and bruised egos. If you're not built for pain, you don't last long. And right now, Cleveland looks like the softest squad in the room. Let's run it down. The Ravens have Lamar Jackson, a human blur with an MVP, a pocket arm, and legs that teleport. His offense hums, his defense hits like a freight train, and his head coach doesn't flinch under pressure. The Bengals? Joe Burrow could show up in a hospital gown with a sprained ankle and still throw for 300 yards. They're young, ruthless, and built to win now. Then you've got the Steelers. Chaos and inconsistency at quarterback? Sure. But Mike Tomlin hasn't had a losing season in almost 2 decades. That's grit. That's leadership. That's a culture that refuses to break. And the Browns? They've got a broken QB room, a divided coaching staff, and $230 million committed to a mystery box wrapped in pressure and bad PR. Jason Kelce didn't just point out flaws. He reminded the world that in this division, good enough means you're already dead. The Browns don't just need to survive their own disasters. They need to survive a schedule that feels like playoff football in week 2. And you can't fake your way through the AFC North. You either punch back or get buried. Cleveland's trying to build stability while surrounded by sharks. But if your foundation is cracked and your quarterback is fragile, the man across the line from you doesn't care. He's blitzing anyway. Here's the thing about Browns fans. You won't find a more loyal, dedicated, battle-tested group anywhere in the league. But even the most faithful soldiers eventually get tired of marching in circles. And right now, they're exhausted. When Jason Kelce spoke, the fan base didn't argue. They exhaled. Like someone had finally said out loud what they've been screaming into their pillows for years. Message boards lit up. Memes flooded social feeds. Tweets like "Kelce gets it," "burn it all down," started trending before lunch. They weren't angry. They were relieved. Some were even thanking him for saying what needed to be said. That's how far gone it is when a retired offensive lineman speaks more truth in 30 seconds than years of press conferences and PR spin. Because Browns fans have lived this. From 0 and 16 to Johnny Football. From Brandon Whedon's flag incident to Baker's exit. And now, watching Joe Flacco outplay a $230 million franchise quarterback, it's not just frustrating anymore. It's insulting. They show up. They buy the jerseys. They swallow the hype every offseason. And in return, they get heartbreak, chaos, and press releases that say trust the process, while the stadium burns in the background. So when Jimmy Haslam throws a tantrum over Kelce's comments, fans aren't shocked. They're numb because they've seen it all. The spirals, the resets, the desperation signings, and short-term miracles followed by long-term nightmares. And now, even with talent on the roster, every Browns supporter quietly knows the truth. Hope is fragile in Cleveland. And faith, that's running on fumes. It was just one comment, one casual, off-the-cuff truth bomb from a retired lineman. But for the Cleveland Browns, it was a full-on earthquake. Jason Kelce didn't reveal any secrets. He didn't dig up dirt. He simply pointed to a flaming house and said, "You might want to do something about that." And the Browns? They panicked. Not because it was unfair, because it was accurate. Now the cracks are impossible to ignore. A quarterback depth chart built like a game of Jenga. A coaching staff on edge. An owner more concerned with the narrative than the nightmare on the field. And through it all, a fan base so beaten down, they don't even flinch anymore. This isn't about one season. It's not even just about Watson or Shedeur or Flacco. It's about a franchise that keeps getting in its own way. They collect talent, build up momentum, and then trip over the exact same problems every single time. No consistency, no accountability, no plan that survives contact with reality. And the NFL doesn't wait for you to figure it out. The Bengals aren't hitting pause. The Ravens aren't holding back. The Steelers will never stop being the relentless, gritty machine they've always been. That's why Kelce's words slammed so hard. They weren't a prediction. They were a diagnosis. If you're a Browns fan, you already know the stakes. If you're in the front office, you better start listening. Because the Browns aren't just one injury away from collapse. They're one truth away from being fully exposed. And this time, the whole league is watching.